For our last session, I would like to invite Dr. Simone Rosini from the Directorate-General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion of the European Commission to introduce the next session for us.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Simone Rosini. I work in the European Commission in DG Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion, the creators of labyrinths in a way, as we were saying before that the Commission creates labyrinths. So it has been a long day, but we have still this session. I remember when I was choosing the university that I was checking one of the nicest university in Italy, and I was reading an interview to the dean, and the dean was like, they asked him, what is the main richness of your university? And I was expecting something like our professors. But he rather said our students, because we attract the best students, and so we create lively debates, and they keep always prepared, always ready, and always flexible. There is this constant exchange and influx. And similarly today, I have to say that I enjoyed a lot the speakers, but I enjoyed a lot the coffee pauses and the coffee breaks, because there are so many interesting people to talk to in this event. And if I understand correctly, this is a quite interactive session, meaning that we'll have 3-4 minutes now left, and then they will create some groups, and we will co-create together, if I understand correctly, a framework of skills development. So only that. You only have to do that in half an hour, come up with a framework for skills development. So I was asked to talk about defining framework of skills development for smart specialization, vocational training, higher education, adult education, and training. So there are 3 main points: gaps in skills development, mismatches between labor supply and demand, and enhancing growth and competitiveness of SMEs through skills development. So everything is obviously in the frame of the smart specialization, which we understand as a strategy, so really a set of choices to make the most out of the richness and of the competitive advantages of the different regions, and to try to build in this system, in this, we said triple helix, quadruple helix, and also quintuple helix, because anyway we have to deal with this world with a finite number of resources, and so we have to, like in the donut economy, taking into account these limits. And in this environment, indeed, which is constantly changed. So many speakers today referred to a number of these mega drivers of change, like that are changing and accelerating the change in this world, like things like technological developments, things like demographic change, things like once we were saying globalization. I saw in a slide from Richard, he was saying deglobalization. I have a different take. I mean, like global, let's say, change in global trade patterns, changing global trade patterns, because in the end, the data shows that there is still an increase of commerce, international commerce, but it's true that we are more divided in blocks rather than being in the booming era of globalization when everyone was with everyone. So in terms of the gaps in skills development, we are facing an increasing number of shortages. This was also mentioned throughout different presentations. We know that 77% of EU companies report difficulties in finding workers with the necessary skills. We know also that 4 out of 10 people in working age lack basic digital skills. And we know that also, especially women, are underrepresented in both in STEM and both in having high digital skills. And against this background of a lack of skills, only 37% of European workers follow a training every year. And this number is not enough. Adriana in the morning mentioned the 60% target that we have in the European Pillar of Social Rights Action Plan. And we still have a lot. The target was for 2030, and we still have a lot of ground to cover there. Also, the Digital Compass targets has at least 80% of adults with basic digital skills and 20 million employed ICT specialists in the EU. Still there are, against these lofty targets, these ambitious targets, we still have widespread gaps in skills development. In terms of mismatches between labor supply and demand, also here the situation is complex because we have, there is these ISCO classifications. I will not deal too much, but let's say managers, then clerical workers, there are 9 main families. And they say there are 436 groups. If you go down, if you break down, there are 9 macro categories, and then if you break down at 4-digit level, you have 436 groups. And 84% of them have at least labor shortages in at least one country. So it's a huge number. Against this, you have 67% of the same categories which are in surplus. Obviously, because there are countries that are like have a skill gap in one sector where there is a skill surplus from another country. So of course there is a role to play for EU labor mobility. But on top of that, there is a big role to play for the VET, for the higher education, and for training, as different speakers as well say today. And then the last point is enhancing growth and competitiveness of SMEs through skills development. Again, this was mentioned today in several speeches. John was saying like there is a lack of structured funding of human capital. I cannot agree more with that. It's also like it's a tall task for the education system to live up to these challenges. I think we have to try to build a system altogether, to a lifelong learning system, and integration is really key, I think, here. And so we have to create this environment where there is constant workforce skill enhancement, and especially it's not enough to have trainings, but we need the good ones that are relevant, that are adaptable, that due to these challenges I was mentioning in the beginning, that can evolve. And then, of course, given the challenges we have ahead, we need especially investment in skills that are very relevant, like in the domain of green skills that we were mentioning today. All the discussion, like of at the beginning, the first speaker, one of the first speakers that was saying like 100% of the solar panels are imported in that region in Spain from China. I mean, we need to regain control there and to live up to this important transformation, and not only seeing the threats, but living up and try to make the most out of the opportunities that the green transition makes, and similarly for the digital skills. We have to foster entrepreneurial skills because, of course, we are in this environment. It's especially we'll see a lack of new companies. We rely in Europe a lot of old companies, and we need new people, new entrepreneurs with new ideas, and that create new goods, new services, new processes, and also through the funding of Horizon Europe. And then we need a focus on the constant focus on the need of the market, I think. So I will wrap it up here, and then I will leave it to you. And I'm really eager to listen to your ideas for this framework of skills development that you can develop.
Thank you very much, Simone. So after this introduction, I would like to ask all of you to form 3 groups where you will discuss these topics that Simone raised from the perspective of vocational training, higher education, and adult education and training. So for our online viewers, I would like to mention that now we will have 20 minutes group discussion each. For you watching online, I encourage all of you to check out these questions, give it a little thought, and then in 20 minutes we will be back with the findings of each group. So now, for you here in person at the conference, I suggest to move to groups with the people sitting closest to you, and in total we would like to have 3 groups. So maybe one group around here, the next group here, maybe someone else can join this side, and the third group somewhere over here. Please sit together, and we will hand out some sheets and pens for you to prepare your thoughts on the topics. Thank you. So, thank you very much. And first, I would like to invite one representative from the group who discussed vocational training. Which group discussed vocational training? Please join me up here and share the findings of your group. Which group had the paper with vocational training? Yeah, okay. On vocational training, so it's going to be you. Thank you, Kimberly. Please join me here and share your findings.
Okay, so our group, we had a good discussion. At first, it wasn't really so clear what we would come up with, but in regards to the first point, gaps in skills development, one point that came up was the fact that there's often too much separation amongst disciplines, and that this makes it kind of hard for people to know what skills are transferable, perhaps, or which skills they have. Another issue tends to be lack of awareness in terms of general programs, things that are just simply missing from curricula that should be included. And so that's something that we recognize is a problem. Something else in relation to gaps in skills development has to do with the fact that students need to just have reformed curricula in many cases. In many instances, for example, here in Hungary, secondary school curricula is not in line with new skills demands. So maybe that's a little bit of point two, but nonetheless, and that leads to discrepancies in terms of how skills are being developed and what skills are actually needed. Another really good, interesting point that was brought up, and this is just probably a little bit based more on reality, is the fact that we cannot just imagine that universities can do all of this work. It's too much for them. They're not in a position to be able to prepare students or graduates in all areas, and so that means that there also needs to be more reaction from, I guess you could say, employers, industry. And so there needs to be a greater recognition that training also needs to take place on the job as well. And in particular, when it comes to quite specialized machines or areas of knowledge, that's not something that universities can necessarily provide. So maybe going to the second point, mismatches between labor supply and demand. We had a discussion about the fact that there also needs to be a shift in mindset, not only within universities, but also amongst employers as well, and maybe that ties in a little bit to what I just said in terms of the idea that maybe it's a problem to imagine that you're going to have graduates ready to just step into a job. They're still going to need some support. We also pointed out, or I'd like to point out that greater collaboration between university and industry is something that would be a good thing. We see this already happening at a lot of elite universities in Europe, around the world, but it shouldn't be something that's just for elite universities. It should just be common. And this once again goes back to thinking about how universities can improve their offerings to meet industry demand, but work and collaborate with industry in order to figure out how to do that. Another point would be, and I like this one, this came from James, with the idea that universities should be a little bit more like vet schools, and vet schools should be a little bit more like universities, in the sense that they could learn from each other. So maybe some peer learning could take place here. Because what we were also saying, and this goes back, or ties back a bit to the notion of mindsets, a lot of time graduates, they just lack the flexibility to understand what they have to offer. And so it would be really great if that was part of what they receive when they're going through their programs. Just courses on soft skills, maybe if you're in vocational training, but also then maybe more practically oriented, applied oriented sorts of skills and competencies. It would be really good maybe if more internships, shadowing and whatnot, these sort of practices were built in just to give people exposure. There was also the point of the importance, and this also ties into notions of mismatches between labor supply and demand, engaging in more tracking of graduates, what is actually happening to them once they leave their programs. And here, once again, peer learning could be used as a tool to help understand where is this working well, what is being done in order to do this sort of monitoring. And then a final point came up in relation to the last point, enhancing growth and competitiveness of SMEs through skills development. This is a big ask. But we learned about some interesting incentives, or I should say initiatives, that are taking place in Hungary, offered by the government, because one of the things we recognize is that SMEs themselves do not have the capacity to develop programs to develop new skills on their own, most necessarily. This is something that needs to really probably come from the government. So in Hungary, there are two initiatives. One is sort of like a tax deduction reduction scheme for SMEs, which collaborate with universities and students to help train the students and also provide research opportunities with the universities. So there's this sort of win-win that occurs for all parties involved. And then also a very interesting scheme of financial rewards for SMEs, where students which are trained by companies are then rewarded with a one-time, I guess you could say, financial gift that they can use however they want. So the student wins by earning a job, and then the SME wins by earning an employee as well as additional funding. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Now, I just wanted to add that not all the examples have to be from Hungary. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And now I'm turning to the group discussing higher education. Please come out here and share your thoughts.
So I was chosen to volunteer for this lovely task. So we had a very lively discussion through different actors of the ecosystem. We had the representatives of higher education institutions, researchers, also private sector. So we talked about gaps in skills development, and I tried to list the thoughts as challenges and opportunities. So one challenge there is a huge gap between the labor market versus academia. So our academia doesn't really know the needs of the labor market, and the labor market is kind of questioning like, okay, what do universities really have to offer to us? So an opportunity related to this is universities to articulate better what they have to offer in terms of transferable skills to companies, but also to better prepare their students to articulate the value they bring. And SMEs are hard to, so there are mismatches between labor supply and demand. And of course, the small, medium enterprises are hard to engage with because there are many. So what we talked about is also basically we're looking at, right now there is a trend in Europe, we are looking at national level policies, national level innovation. There is a need for local focus because that's how it becomes manageable. But of course, not every country is prepared for that, so there needs to be capacity building around this as well. And of course, the notion came up that academia is much slower than the industry is and as policies are, so that's also one challenge that came up. I think that's the wrap-up.
Thank you very much. There seem to be several universal or global challenges that we all face in this regard, I guess. And now I would like to invite a representative from the group who discussed adult education and training.
So I stay here so you can help me to complete, okay? Because we had also really fruitful discussions, but maybe not really structured. So I try to summarize. Maybe we start from the fact that we are in a world that is changing fast, that we need, in fact, new skills. That's, we face new challenges, and we also yes, really need new skills, but also that there will be many people that will have to also, many jobs will be in the near future maybe sometimes useless, and so we not only have to think to skills, to new skills, but also to re-skills the people. Many people. So that's a question that we try to answer. We didn't really answer, but still it's an important fact to start. So to know what we need in terms of competency, we need, it's difficult to know what we will need in the near future, but we can still try to have an insight on that, and for that we should we can identify some trends. Yes, maybe I want to give the example of Germany, you know, because you explain us and Bosch, yes, that in Bosch, you know, it was specialized in comment? Pushments, and yes.
Okay, just an example from a Bosch company who was producing push belts for transmission, CVTs, and they emphasized that it's going to be obsolete because if we all drive electric, we don't need transmissions anymore, so there is no demand anymore for these push belts. But they have a very thorough knowledge of working on metal, thin metal, and they are using that knowledge to produce parts for electrolyzers. So this complete company is changing from a push belt producer to a part of electrolyzer producer, using their competences as a company. And this is a very good example, in my opinion, what kind of transitions we are facing and how you can deal with it very successfully and still be in business as a company and have a job as an employee and use your knowledge of a certain technology in a different application. And that's what we are aiming at. And in completing your statement, we have a lot of people, we have far more people working already in Europe, needing to change probably their profession or their company in the next years. Then we get students from the university and other education institutes in the next years. So, and if the pressure on labor and labor effectiveness is so huge in Europe to maintain our level of health and to maintain our productivity, this is a potential we should address as soon as possible by providing them with the right training courses to adapt as soon as possible. Thank you.
So you see, we don't have only example from Hungary. Huh? So it's a good example also that we can identify the trends, you know, that Bosch have succeeded to that. And so for that, we had also another example from Germany, you know, where they create consortia, where consortia of different stakeholders of the ELIX, and where they really map the needs of the SMEs. And it was really effective because in that way they could really identify the skills that were needed and propose some efficient training. So that's one possibility to really create this kind of consortia and be really close to the market and the needs of the industrial sector. The challenge is also to create a framework enough agile to adapt and to propose this training. For that, I don't know if we find some solution, but we know that we have to be agile in that way. So we can, yes, it's important to be enough agile. It's maybe sometimes important also to get out of the certificates and all, yes, and all that, what? Degrees, yes, and all that degrees. Yes, we also say that people, yes, about the need of new skills, it's important that maybe you can transfer skills from a sector to another. This is important, and this could be made also through smart specialization, and it could be made also at local level, but maybe also at the European level. But also we say that, so it's important we can transfer knowledge from different sectors, but also that people want it to stay in their company. That's also sometimes a fact, and want it to stay in their ecosystem. So in that sense, that smart specialization strategy could play a role in creating ecosystem and sharing challenges and knowledge, and it was maybe done in the example of Germany. Do you have something to add? Okay, that's it.
Thank you very much. Indeed, I can see that you were talking about many things in that group, because this summary was such informative that it's, yeah, I think it was very useful for all of us. I would like to ask Simone to give a short review of this session.
Thanks a lot, Dora. I mean, it was very nice. I was right for once. It was really nice to listen to what you said, what you put together. And I think it's also interesting that so many of the challenges that you discuss and the problems that these three different systems have are very similar in a way. So there were some trends that were appearing throughout the three discussions, like the changes that are affecting the system, and the fact that this is reflected in maybe rigidity in the education system, in the trainings, and in that. And I think it's something that I can totally subscribe to. It's also a matter of the gap between these systems is also relevant, and also the fact that maybe there is a lack of communication sometimes. So there was this academia or vet and training in general is slower than the market, and they need to communicate, but they have different processes, and so there needs to be agility on the one side and the capacity to understand the other and getting close to each other. And this was true and was appearing both between these two systems, meaning like the training providers, if you want, education providers, and pupils or trained people, and also between the different types of institutions. So in one of the discussions it was said like university should learn from vet, and vet should learn from university. So we know as well that it's always a bit complicated, no, to talk to each other, and because it's time consuming, and because these different words have different vocabulary sometimes. But I think that, just to wrap up, that smart specialization can indeed be something that is very relevant also for this. Because if it's true that there are different vocabulary that this word use, it's also true that a point of contact is exactly the territory in which these people are operating. So when you're talking about rigidity, it's also maybe sometimes there is the same thing taught exactly the same across the board, but not everything is math. that it's an exact rule. Sometimes when you dig and you are in a specific context, then who understands better who can, in principle, understand better the challenges of the local company, if not the training providers that is in the region, if not the vet center that is in the region, if not the university that is in the region. Of course, it needs indeed to have, everyone should be on board. The training providers, the academia, the companies, and the government. Again, we come back to the triple and quadruple helix and quintuple helix. So thanks a lot. I mean, it was nice to hear you talk, to hear what you have been discussing in the three groups. It was a pleasure to moderate this session, open and close, more than moderating, because you self-moderate yourself well enough. So thanks a lot. Back to you.